So I am going to give you a territorial acknowledgement from the Diocese of Montreal. So we are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanakahaga Mohawk at a place called Tiohtià:ke in Montreal. This is a meeting place for many First Nations, including the Haudenosaunee, Six Nation Confederacy, Anishinaabeg, and Algonquin peoples. We recognize and respect the Kanakahaga as the traditional stewards of the land and waters of Tiohtià:ke. So keep your eye on the chat so that we can get to know each other a little bit. Please use the chat to say, are you able to use the chat function? I see nobody's done that. Yes, I see one. So use the chat function to introduce yourself, say hi, say where you are from, maybe your role in leadership, and your territorial acknowledgement would be really great. I'm going to pray us. So let us pray. Just take a moment in prayer. Creator God, we ask for your holy presence this morning at this workshop. Be with us both as presenters and participants. Pour out your blessing on each of us, whether we're participating live or if you are at another time. We ask for your blessing, Lord. Be our guide and our encouragement. Fill us now with a renewed passion and curiosity. Inspire us, give us a desire to learn and grow, the willingness to try new things, and the grace to make mistakes. Give us the courage and the strength to do all this through you and in your name. Amen. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So nice to have you with me here on a Saturday morning. I'm from the Diocese of Montreal, and my name is Leanne Matthews, and I'm going to be your host this morning as we dive into the exciting topic of hosting and inspiring events for ministry. Many of you by now, thanks for those. Many of you by now will have received an ebook in your inbox. If you're registered, you should have received the ebook. So this is why we're here, to talk about that and to also unpack this subject more and more. So everybody seems muted, so that's great. Housekeeping, just as a reminder, keep your microphones muted. This is an interactive session, so there will be lots of opportunities for you to unmute yourself, to say things, to communicate with myself and with the panel of speakers this morning. But please do use the chat throughout. If you have something to say, you can communicate with each other in there. I really appreciate seeing the chat and seeing so much interaction. I also want to welcome those who, this is recorded, as you know. Many people are at events themselves this morning and couldn't be here. Many of our clergy and many leaders from near and far are also hosting this morning. So they've asked for this session to be recorded. So if you're watching on the recording, welcome to you as well. I'm just very pleased to share this time with you. Honestly, this has been such an encouraging time in preparation for this webinar, collaborating with such an amazing team. So I'll introduce myself a little bit of my background and what brings me to this conversation. So my name is Leanne Matthews. I'm a project coordinator and a communications coordinator at the Diocese of Montreal. And I have a background also in education, 20 plus years in the classroom. I have a background as an entrepreneur. I'm also a kids yoga teacher, and I'm a student of marketing, and I have a big passion for communications and digital communications and social media. So that's a little bit about me. I have actually hosted, as I was sort of doing the calculations, I've actually hosted hundreds of projects, which I was like, oh, could that actually be? And if I tally it all up, I've been doing projects in many ways, shapes, and forms for a really long time. And I guess, maybe 7 years in diocesan ministry and 10 years in parish ministry. But so in all that time, a lot of ministry projects have taken place, which inspired the book, which inspired the ebook, which of course you have right now. And I was inspired really to write the book in particular following an event that we hosted in the Diocese of Montreal a few months ago. In June, we hosted a family day. And many people showed up at this family day. Just to give you a sense, I made 180 lunches. So it was a surprising and wonderful event. It got us thinking. We're like, we really want to share this encouragement. We really want to share this encouragement with others, with other leaders and other communities. So we thought, let's put together a manual of sorts that kind of walks you through basically approaches that I have used to host, and hopefully they will be helpful to you as well. I want to give you kind of 3 key points from the ebook. That I hope you will take nothing else away. Just take these 3 points away. But please do read the whole ebook. Please print it out, and here, I'll show it to you. Very excited to see it yesterday, all printed and ready to go. This is how it looks when it's printed. It's like about 45 pages. So print it and use it and scribble in it, and this should turn into a really, really messed up manual with lots of doodles all over it, hopefully. But the guide is based on my experience, as I said, but there are many project management templates you can find. You can Google a project management template, and you can use that one in conjunction with this one. You may also, as a leader, and you may have much of your own experience. So you can compare and contrast with your own experience. But literally, I'll walk you through a process here that has worked for me quite reliably. Use it as a tool. But if you have hosted before, draw from your own experience with this one. But if you've never hosted before, now you have a place to go to make it happen, to start. I want to also say there's no secret sauce. I'm not telling you this is how you do it and everything's going to be fine. I don't have a secret sauce or a magic bullet, but I can kind of identify a number of criteria that you might draw from, personal criteria. And I would say those things would be grit. So you need grit to host. You need a little bit of perseverance and some energy and some drive, determination, those things, grit. And you also need curiosity. And I say curiosity because when you approach hosting inspiring events for ministry from a posture of curiosity, there's no such thing as an unsuccessful event, because you have ultimately already won, because you've satiated your curiosity to learn and grow as a leader. So that's just a given. When you learn and try, you satiate your curiosity. Of course, project-based ministry is contextual. So I want us to dig a little bit deeper into what contextual means, because I think I'll challenge us to, maybe as leaders, we'll say like, I've already tried that, or I know my people, I know myself, I can't do that. I think that we might sometimes draw shallow conclusions about what context looks like. So I'm going to ask us to push a little bit this morning, push ourselves, maybe not to draw premature conclusions about who we are and what our context is, and maybe to dig a little deeper. And most importantly, when it comes to hosting, I want you to know your why. I want you to know your why, and we're going to workshop this in the second portion of today's session. But knowing your why is literally the thing that will take you from being a great leader to an inspiring leader. So many organizations know their how, they know their what, but when you know your why, that's the thing that's going to take you to the next level. So a little bit of an overview now about the topic more widely, the topic of hosting events. I mean, we know we're all here because we're all leaders in ministry. And let's be honest, hospitality is kind of in our DNA. It's what we do. It's like everybody knows how to host every Sunday. If nothing else, we gather and we host, whether we're doing it on Zoom or we're doing it on person, is what we do. We're kind of famous for it, actually, and not always in the best way. Let's be honest. Sometimes we have a reputation for being a little bit sort of dusty in the way that we gather. And so today we're going to just, again, push a little bit against that and see if we can maybe identify some new ways to look at new models for gathering. In my research, in preparation for the ebook and for this webinar, I have been speaking with so many church leaders, listening and learning, and it's clear that there are many, many models of ministry to be inspired by. I mean, my personal Facebook feed is packed with them. And so I've been reaching out to leaders and learning from them. And I spoke to one leader who actually gave me the permission to quote him, and I have a quote from him. His name is Dr. Evan Silcox, and he is a priest, Anglican priest here in the Diocese of Toronto. And he's doing some really interesting community ministry, some of which involves his dog, like a husky, and his passion for cycling. And he shared some of his thoughts with me. I'm just going to quickly read a quote to you that I think will be helpful to frame this conversation. So he said, "The most important thing we can do as Christians is to get out of our buildings, stop presuming that faith in church is this compartmentalized part of our lives and involves private prayer and thinking about God or just our social church function. We need to spend time in our communities, foremost developing relationships. Relationships can happen, but only if you are first willing to listen to the other person. Don't try to interject God or your faith. First listen. Be curious about who they are, what they struggle with, but also what they hope and what they dream about. Listening isn't about finding something to talk about. Rather, it's you giving them space to show you who they are. And I really love that quote because event-based ministry is really about allowing people to show us who they are instead of us showing people who they are. So it's really relational. Anyway, that's me. That's a bit of framework. That's a bit of background about the manual and about what brought us here. But of course, we have a panel of presenters this morning, and I would like to introduce them to you. They are a top-notch panel, and it has been really a privilege to collaborate with them on this session today. All Anglican clergy, all from various parts of Canada, different pockets and walks of life. Really, we've had some very invigorating conversations leading up to this, and I hope that you will be as invigorated as I am when you listen to them. The first speaker I'll introduce is my buddy, Neil Mancour. He, of course, is also our congregational development coordinator here in Diocese of Montreal. He's a spin instructor and he's a parent of human children as well as his little pug Basco. Everybody knows Basco because you've probably heard him snoring on Zoom at some point. So great to have Neil and Basco sharing his wisdom. So welcome to Neil. Thank you so much for being one of our presenters today. Yay, Neil. Also, we have the Reverend Steve Green is in the house. He is a ministry force to be reckoned with. If you know, you know. He's an inspiring and charismatic leader, and today he'll be talking about the theology of community. He's someone who just gets it, and he clearly loves what he does. And his energy is infectious. So he's a father, he's a husband, and he's a slam poetry lover. And I want to welcome Steve. We're honored that you're here with us today. Welcome to Steve Green. I also have with us today the Reverend Martha Tatarnic, a brilliant author. Many of you hopefully have been reading and will read her book, Why Gather. I was so excited when I saw that she wrote this book. I felt just sort of serendipitous, and I reached out to Martha and she graciously agreed to be here. She'll be talking about her book. We will put the link to the book in the comments, and I really do hope that everybody will take the opportunity to get a copy of this book. I feel like Martha and I are friends now just from reading the book, even though we're not really friends, but you read this book and you just want to hang out with Martha. It's such a brilliant, relaxed, and chill read, but also really insightful and deep. And so I'm feeling it, Martha, and I'm so, so honored that you are here with us today. So welcome to Martha Tatarnic. All right, so before I pass it over to the speakers, I want to make sure that you all are okay, because anything I need to do to help you with, I can't even see everyone on the 2 pages, so I'm going to step over. Is everything okay? Is there anything anyone needs to say? Unmute yourself and say it now before the speakers start. Okay, it looks like we're calm and well. I hope you have enough to drink and that you're comfortable. And I'm going to introduce welcome now, I should say, my friend Neil. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Leanne, and good morning to everyone. I'm calling this talk, Who is My Neighbor? How can I love them? That is the question I want to think about today and focus on. I think it is the crucial question and the life-giving question for all of us in our communities of faith. When you think about it, Jesus gave some excellent advice that comes from deep within his tradition, his ancient tradition, when he reminded them and us of the scriptures that say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. To love your neighbor as yourself with the same intensity and the same care and the same attention. And how we do that, I think, is a life-giving question. And that is really what this whole seminar this morning is about and how it directs us as communities of faith today and now in our different contexts. We'd often like to talk about being missional. It's a word that's been around for a long time. We have to be missional. And I think that's really what it's about. To be missional means that we will focus on our neighbors. And we mean literally our neighbors, the people who live all around our communities of faith, the people in our orbits. But when we think about that word missional in church, I often think there's a yes, but that arises, especially when we're feeling nervous about the future of our communities. And we say, yes, we should be missional. We need to be missional. But how do we get them to come to church on Sunday? Or yes, we should do ministry to families and children. Yes, but how do we get them to come to Sunday school? Because we really need to replenish that. Now, those are cries from the heart of very faithful people who have served in their churches for years. And often we have seen numbers dwindling perhaps or becoming less than they used to be. So it's understandable we ask that. We say yes, but. Yet I do not think that is any longer a profitable question for us to ask, and it can even be a pathway to frustration. And leads us to focus on one event, that Sunday morning event that we all know and love, that is important to us. And yet we quickly think, well, if we make some improvement to that Sunday morning event, change the coffee, change the style of music, or change the priests, that's going to make all the difference. And yet they don't seem to come, at least not in the numbers that we would like. But I think the life-giving question, the question that gives us energy and vitality in our communities, is how do I love my neighbor? It is the missional question. Who is my neighbor? Do you know who your neighbors are? Do you know who the people are who live around you? Do you think about how you can serve them or how you can make common cause with them? Because our conviction in gathering here today is that we can renew our sense of service to others, to give and not expect anything in return. And so in doing that important work to find for our communities purpose, meaning, and vitality that may not take us back to the glory days, but actually can take us into the present in a different way, in a living way. And that's why we're thinking about events. An event-based ministry. What are things that we can do that reach and serve others? We have the Sunday morning event, and that's really important to us. What else can we do that serves my neighbor? So who is my neighbor? Now, that is a really good question for us to be asking. Who are the people who live around your churches or in your orbits of your lives? We often make assumptions about these people, I think, don't we? We think we know who these people are. We think we know what their lives are like. And so we say things like, well, nobody goes to church anymore. Well, people are busy now. They have busy lives. Maybe people don't really believe in God anymore. Maybe they're not interested in religion. Young people are apathetic. They don't care. And maybe it's different from you. I know we're coming from many contexts here this morning, here in the Quebec contexts. We very quickly say, well, of course, Quebec is different and no one goes to church. There's a history. No one is going to go to church. And all of that assumes that perhaps no one wants what we have to offer. So we just keep offering the same thing. But what we can do is start with a genuine interest and sense of curiosity about the people and the communities around our churches and begin to ask some questions about them. First question would be, well, what are their lives like? Because what their lives are like might condition how we might reach out, how we might serve, what we might want to do. Are they mostly wealthy? Because everyone has needs. Or are you in a place of economic struggle? And there are many sort of levels between that. Sometimes you might be in a place where people are just struggling to get by, struggling to raise families. How can you serve them? Are they mostly seniors living in bungalows or families with young children? Or Are they in a place where you have a lot of young adults renting apartments and starting out on their careers? Or what about the ethnicity of the people around you? Are they established in their lives or new to the community or to Quebec or Ontario or Nova Scotia or wherever, to Canada? How do they structure their families? Do they have large extended families? Or are they more open in the structure of their families? What are their values? So pay attention to that, because that can guide how you can serve. You can find needs that you can meet, relationships that you can build. What are the needs that you can plug into that are consistent with our values as the people of God? Because in places where there is loneliness, we can think about what are the conversations people want to have. Do they have to eat on their own a lot? Can you put on dinner for people? What are their food preferences? Because people in different stages of their life actually like to eat kind of different foods. So what are the things that they like to do? Or what about children? Because children's ministry is important. And it is hard to see Sunday schools in many places not perhaps being what it once was. But I don't think that means we should be hard on ourselves. We just have to think about gathering families and children in a different way. Like Leanne was saying to you, we had this wonderful event here back in June, Family Day, and lots of families came. And you know what? They came and had fun in church. And that was the most beautiful thing to see. So ask yourself, are there lots of kids in your neighborhood? Who are they? Do they need to go somewhere after school? Are their parents looking for enrichment opportunities for them? That's why Messy Church is a really great model. You don't have to do Messy Church and the whole Messy Church shebang, but the convenient time, the enrichment opportunities for children, the relationships with elders, and the dinner, always dinner, that's a gift to busy people. It can be a great place for some who feel like they don't fit in, and for others who have very, very scheduled lives. And many of the children and young people in our communities live intensely scheduled lives. It can be great that we kind of say, you know, you meet once a month and it's church and it's okay. So who are these children? Who are their families? How can we connect with them and serve them? Or what about their values? What are the values of the people who live around you? What do they care about? That can be a really great way to go around and do a survey of your community and find out what are the things people care about. We actually know a lot about the issues people are interested in and agitating about. We know what Canadians care about and where they're willing to put their money and their time and their effort, where they want to agitate. We know that people care deeply about racism. They care about the environment. They care about justice and LGBTQ2S plus inclusion. What people cares about differs around age groups and places where they live. So find out, what are the things people in your community are agitating for, protesting about, raising money for? Because there is so much potential for us to make common cause with others and to show why the church is relevant to their lives. We have a church out here in the West Island of Montreal where I live, St. Mike's, and they have created an anti-racism circle that is connected with an organization called WIBCA, the West Island Black Community Association. And that is a very fruitful association about an issue that we care about and many people in the community care about, racism. And it's so fruitful because it benefits church and community. And, you know, the people of St. Mike's love WIBCA and the people of WIBCA love St. Mike's, and they work together. And that's what relevance really means. So think about what the issues people in your community are caring about. What are they raising money for? What are they agitating? Or what about people's spirituality? And again, we often assume that most people today aren't spiritual or do not have a spirituality. But just because they're not necessarily buying what we have to offer doesn't mean that they're not spiritual or have ways of seeking to express their spirituality. And I think that that is a great opportunity for us to extend ourselves beyond what we know and, again, connect with people around their spiritual needs. I was looking for a yoga class. I decided I need to limber up a little bit. I'm sort of getting a little too stiff. And so I was looking around for a yoga class. And I found this yoga instructor in my community. And he started this yoga group because he wanted to meet the needs of people for spiritual fulfillment in the community. And I thought, oh, wait, I thought that was our job. I thought that's what we did. And it really struck me. And I thought, how missional is that here is someone using yoga to address spiritual fulfillment in the community. And I thought, pay attention. And we can run that down. We can say, oh, yoga, isn't, it's not really spiritual, but you know what? People are going, they're getting their needs met. They're connecting with their idea of God through that. And, he's in the community talking about it. People are talking about spirituality, and people are active in seeking their spiritual needs in different ways. So maybe that's something that we can pay attention to. We know that people don't like words like religion, but they do like words like spiritual, meditation, thoughtfulness. So I think that it's a great thing to pay attention to. And how can we connect with that as communities of faith? Use the spaces we have, use our own spiritual energy in a way that connects with other people. It's true, actually, Leanne said, I'm involved in spinning. I love spinning classes. They're actually very spiritual. Authentically, spinning has a spirituality to it. And it's the way you approach the bike, the way you connect to the bike, and then you connect into the ride, and you're visualizing. And at the end of a spinning class, you've actually really achieved something, which I think is very powerful. And we have a phrase in spinning, which is leave it on the bike, which kind of sounds like leave it at the cross, doesn't it? Only we say leave it at the bike, leave it on the bike. So whatever you've come with, cycle like mad and leave it on the bike at the end of the hour, and you'll have done something. So, let's connect. Let's think about that. Let's be open about talking about spiritual needs and have conversations around it. People are interested. It's just not always a Sunday morning kind of thing. So that's just a few things to think about. Who is my neighbor? Who are the people around us? And why might we then begin to reshape our ministries around putting on events and different things that might connect with people or make common cause with people or reach out to people? It's a very active, proactive thing that Leanne is challenging us to do. But there are a lot of benefits to us. I think this is where risk-taking comes in. When we take risks as a community, I'm not saying we should bet the bank on one thing, but I think the risk is that we try. We try something and see what happens. We put our effort in and see what the results are. We give it all and see. Try to see what kind of connection you can make. Try being willing to learn from others. And you might just see a few benefits. I think one benefit is you might make some new friends. I think that's a great way of thinking about being missional. Maybe we just need to make friends with people, not parishioners, not members. We don't need to recruit them to the Altar Guild. We just need to make friends. I find that to be the richest thing of all. Or you might gain new vitality. Because I find in my work as congregational development coordinator, or wherever I go, that if you go into a church where everyone's kind of desperate and wringing their hands, that tends to be a bit of a negative atmosphere. I mean, I had a friend who went to a church, which will go nameless. On her first Sunday, she was recruited for the Altar Guild because they were so desperate for members. I would suggest that's not the most helpful approach to a new person, but, a church that's desperate and looking for answers can sometimes become more so. But even a small congregation that does something positive, that somehow reaches out or becomes, has some kind of result is we met some new people, we did something, it was successful in the sense that we managed to put something on or reach out or we tried something new. A congregation that has that sense of purpose often becomes more focused, more positive, and so more vital. And I think a church that has some sense of positivity, that, hey, we know that we actually are relevant to this community. And hey, we are doing something. And yeah, we are active. I think that's attractive. And it sends out a very different signal. And lastly, I think you get to serve the gospel. Because actually, the scriptures never tell us to just wait. Oh, sorry, that's Basco. They never tell us to just wait at home. They command us to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Not sitting around waiting, hoping someone will come, but making it our mission to love our neighbors. I'm glad I'm at my last paragraph because Basco's very barking now. And I cannot think of a better church energizing task than that. And it's God honoring, and it is the gospel. How can we love our neighbors as ourselves? That's the question to ask. Let's see where it leads.
Neil, mic drop. Yes. So much there. So as I promised you, this is not going to be a one-way conversation. You've said a lot of very inspiring material, and I really invite you now to roll up your sleeves and engage with this conversation. Engage with Neil, engage with others who are here. Please unmute yourself and either give your feedback to Neil or to the group. We'd love to hear from you. So, because otherwise it'll just be me talking again, and you really don't want that. So, I'm going to mute myself and listen to you, what your response to Neil's talk was.
Hi, can I speak?
Please.
Please.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Neil. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I wonder, whether the discussion about how we support ourselves and the discussion of how we love each other can be separated in some ways. Because I know that where I am, I don't think the Sunday morning service will continue to be able to support the community in the same way. So we have to figure out how to support the community. And I'm convinced that the future is in small things. So events, right? So dinners where we get people from different backgrounds to talk about a particular issue, or events where messy church-like events or something like that. And I was wondering, but not to expect that to finance it, right? Because we need to understand that relationships take a long time, and people aren't going to want to come to an event if suddenly you talk about, oh yes, and we're $50,000 in the red on our yearly budget. So think about that when you're, thinking about whether you want to come for the next dinner or, whatever. So, to be realistic about what we can expect from people who are just putting a toe in and doing it anyway, because that's what we're supposed to do. I guess the thing that I would think about also, or a question that I would have, is, do we have event style things where we get people there to create a community among themselves? Or is it something that you have, say, 10 events a year, and different people come to different events, and maybe there might be a few core people, or maybe not even? Have you thought about that, Neil?
I don't know. I think you have to let your imagination run wild, I'd say, depending on what it is you're trying to do. So we put on, for example, that family day that was very contextual, not just for the diocese, but for that neighborhood. and it was about kind of meeting needs. And if you came to the family day we did, it was so powerful to see all these families all having fun. And I remember when I had two small kids, I would jump in something like that. It was like 2 hours where my kids were safe and could have fun, and lunch was provided. So it was giving something to people, not demanding something of them. But
But also not creating community.
Yeah, but I mean, it was doing it in the context of church, and there they were, and so it was a scattering of seeds. Like, hey, we're having fun in church. We could have done like maybe treasure hunts in the church or something, So there's endless possibilities to sort of scatter those seeds and see what's going on. But like the dinner church is great, and I think the challenge for us, the risk is to create spiritual community, but just to do that in a slightly different way. I mean, our dinner church expression here, Supper Club, is very spiritual. We pray, we sing songs, we talk about God and Jesus and faith, but it's a different way than we do on Sunday morning. And I think we shouldn't be afraid of spirituality. In fact, we should need to embrace that, but in an open way that embraces others and gives them space to express their spiritual impulses. So that might be like a monthly dinner or something. Or do a yoga class. I love yoga.
I thought I saw Donna's hand up. No.
Hi, can I say something?
Yeah, and also, so great, Cheryl, please do. And then after Astrid.
Okay, thank you. I am so happy that you talked about relationship. That is the crux of everything that we do. I do a lot of work with Indigenous youth, and it is only through generations of relationship building that we're starting now to get somewhere, particularly through our camp. And without relationship, you can't, and with stepping back, you can't begin to learn where you need to go and what is needed, and how you can lift others up into those positions of leadership, to let them know that they have the wisdom in them. I'm talking particularly about the youth. I'm seeing a seismic shift now where I'm able to sort of fade back into the bushes like Homer Simpson and watch the youth take over with reconciliation while I just sort of help guide it along. And so the relationship is key to every single thing in the church, 100%. So thank you so much for standing on that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Astrid, go ahead.
Yeah, I love this discussion. It's wonderful. I live in a retirement community. There are many, many events happening all the time in the community. When I retired to this community, I joined book club, I joined the Legion, I joined Victoria's Quilts, so I'm in the community almost every day. How do I convince our members, our congregation, who are aging and tired and have done everything for years, to step out of the box?
What might that outside of the boxness look like to you?
I don't know. I mean, it could be anything, but we're in that sort of maintenance place, we can manage, but just, we have about 30 people in church on a Sunday, a number of whom don't live full-time in the area, and they are the sort of younger crowd. then there are those of us who are well over 70 or over who live in the area, and they don't have the energy to do a lot of things. We do a few things, but we don't do a lot of things in the community. I don't know. I find I love all of these ideas. I wish I want to be out there. I'm making connections in the community myself all the time. But as a church, we're still in the mindset of maintaining.
Yeah.
Can I speak? I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up. Can I speak to Astrid's? Astrid, my name's Janet. I'm from Summerside PEI. We have it's a 2-point parish. 90% of our parishioners would be the 70 or older. I started a knitting group 5-6 years ago, and the purpose of it was to knit prayer shawls. And through the years, we went from 4 or 5 members, regular church members who came to the knitting group, and then partly because of friendships and a little bit because of COVID and other groups closing down, we've grown to 15. The core group from our church still go to church. The rest don't. But every time I come up with a crazy idea that I want to reach out into the community and do something, when I can't get support from our regular church, I go to the knitting group. And they're there to support me every time. We did a shower last fall for a women's shelter. And I asked in the church for help, and there was a few, but not many. But the knitting group all showed that day. We came up with an idea. Something new we're doing this year is we're going to have a community supper once a month for Holland College students, which is a local college on the island, for the international students who are here away from home. And I went to the church and I was told to go back and be quiet, sit down. Our resources were overstretched. We didn't have any more time. There were no more people. There was no more energy. So I went out to the knitting group, and then I went to the community. I went to my friends. And I have enough people now that we're going to start the end of the month. We're going to hold our first dinner. So I think, you know what, we have to, I love Neil. Neil, you know, I'm a huge fan. So, and I'm thrilled to be here today. But I think we have to acknowledge our church community and the situation there. But we have to keep pushing and taking those risks and reaching out to those other groups that you belong to. There's people there who would likely love to help. That's what I'm finding anyway. So, as I said about the community dinner, when I was told no, I said, well, I think I'll give it to God for a couple of weeks and we'll see what he does with this. And now we have our first dinner planned. So it works. Yeah.
I can't wait to hear how that dinner goes.
Yeah.
I know. We're pretty excited about it. Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I recently had a suggestion, just to go back to Janet, that we have a pickling day in the fall. And it came actually from one of the members of the church who travels back and forth between us and Ottawa. She belongs to a church in Ottawa as well. Anyway, so that's going to happen at some point. We'll get together in the church hall and pickle stuff at this time of year. So you see, you're right. I mean, there are things happening, but it seems like you're pushing a rock uphill to try to get the congregation involved.
I think let's just return for a moment to what Cheryl said when she was pleased about our emphasis on relationships. And I think this is what I'm hearing from Janet and Astrid, And maybe we can just sort of focus more on the global sense of connection and relationships. These are the things that will ultimately propel these smaller event-based ministries forward.
Mhm.
Are there any other thoughts for Neil, questions for Neil, anything else we wanted to say to Neil before we move on? Yes, Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm in St. Catharines, and I am an event-based ministry. My husband and I have a music duo called Infinitely More, and we've done 10,000 events over the years with different churches of all denominations, going in for single events or series of events. So this is very, very deep to my heart. And Neil, I really appreciated what you said about how churches get this mindset that we'll do something on a Wednesday, but let's hope that it brings people Sunday morning. And I think that's a limiting way to think of church. So in the last 14 years or so, Gerald and I have done, we spent the better part of those years also working with non-Sunday morning services. So like Sunday nights or Wednesday nights. We work with Martha on a service called Advent Cafe that happens Wednesday nights. And how do we help our leadership and congregants recognize that those things are church and that those people don't need to come on Sunday morning and be part of that community to still be part of our church community?
Yeah, and yeah, not to be asking, so when are they going to get envelopes? Because that's often the thing. And yeah, that this is church and that this is worthwhile in itself. Absolutely. Because I think if you have the view that we're going to make a direct link to Sunday morning, you're not going to go about it in the missional way. Yeah. And you need to be able to really sit with that. But then you never know, right? So like when I was running Messy Church, all of those Messy Church people, we actually in the end had fewer families coming on Sunday because they came to Messy Church, right? Mm-hmm. But then all of those people decided that church was their church when it came to Christmas. And so all of a sudden on Christmas Eve, they all showed up with all their families. And we were like, it was like the old days again, right? It was overwhelmingly wonderful. So their blessings are different blessings. But if these people begin to think of your church as their church or as relevant to them, more important, this is something that's very life-giving for the church. Yeah.
I think too, with schedules not necessarily being 9 to 5 and Monday to Friday as they were in years past, having church on a Sunday night or a Wednesday, I think we need to start recognizing that that can just be church. That church doesn't just mean you need to show up on Sunday. Because like I know I'll speak to our Wednesday night community. It is strong and close and very spiritual and different than Sunday morning. And I don't know why I wish as churches we could recognize that church doesn't just need to happen on 1 hour a week.
Yeah. And then people's lives are very scheduled. I mean, children's lives are intensely scheduled. And so Sunday morning may be scheduled. And it's not just sports, right? We used to complain about all the soccer games on Sunday morning. So yeah, it's a gift to people to say, okay, we're doing this Wednesday and this is church too. Yeah. It's giving them a gift.
Allison, thank you so much. I know you and I had spoken on Facebook Messenger, and I'm really glad you made that connection for us. We put the link into the chat about the ministry that you and your husband are up to. So thank you for sharing that, and please check that out. I did, and it's really interesting. So there are 2 hands up. We have Robert, and so let's go Robert first, and then there was another one, but we'll go Robert first. Gail.
I'm going to cede to Gail. I do want to speak, but I want to cede to Gail because she's had her hand up a little longer than I have.
Thank you, Robert. My thought as I'm listening to Ashton, because I'm very familiar with the Laurentian X regional ministry, was that I think complacency has happened within the church system because of COVID, because of not being able to get together even on a Sunday morning or even on a Wednesday to do Bible study or whatever. And so fortunately, we have Zoom. Zoom is my go-to. I've been very ill this year and so have not been attending church because I'm immunocompromised now. And so for me, it's very important to be able to witness services. And I have all over the world. And it's been very comforting. But here at Christchurch Bells Corners, we have a group that meets Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for Compline. And that has become a group of 7-8 people that are very, very spiritually involved with one another and caring. But we also pray for the wider church and the wider world, those 3 times a day. And that's very meaningful. And I think, like someone said, smaller groups may be how you start, or the one-on-one. Like, we have new neighbors. I haven't seen them because I stay inside. I need to go and knock on the door when I'm feeling better and say, hi, I'm across the hall. Is there anything I can do? You know, and just be there. And I know when I was in hospital, I was ministering to my nurses, which was amazing. Totally amazing. They got a sermon from me on Sunday mornings, mostly. It was quite something. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Gail.
So I was struck by something that was said, a quote that Archbishop Justin Welby used at the Lambeth conference. He quoted Pope Francis and noted that as shepherds in our denominations, in our churches, we need to be amongst the sheep and smell like the sheep. Because we are amongst them, we smell like them. That if we're going to be shepherds, sort of shepherding from a distance, it's not going to work. And I think that, we're post-Christian communities where we need to, people look at us with a bit of wonder as to who are these people, because they don't know who we are. And as Gail mentioned with her neighbor, not knowing who her neighbor is, it is important that we knock on that door and let them know who we are in a non-threatening way. So I think that one-off events where we're in the community and we're participating in the life of the community, and they get to know us, the barriers start to break down, and they don't see us with suspicion anymore. If there's a chance of them not seeing us with suspicion, it's about them getting to know who we are, as opposed to us sort of forcing ourselves on them, or just expecting them to come and knock on our door. I think that the only way they're going to ever walk through our doors is if we are amongst them, and they get to know us in a non-threatening way.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I also will just add to that by saying that, strategically, these are relationships that you can continue to nurture, as we're working on various projects as a result of our Family Day, for example, thanks to the emails that we have captured from people who registered. So they came to know us. Now they're curious about what we're going to do next, and we're not planning on leaving all those people high and dry. We have next steps for those relationships. So the one-off can actually translate to deeper and more meaningful ministry in the long run. I'm going to ask us to I think there is a hand. Is there a hand up? I can. Sophie. Yes. Okay. So let Sophie be the last comment for Neil.
I've spoken before, so if you prefer to just let me.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I listened to this, and I think it's. I wonder what makes this Anglican, and I don't mean this in a challenging way. I'm an Anglican. I chose the Anglican Church as an adult, with my eyes open, and I felt called to the priesthood. I feel very committed to Anglican spirituality, to Anglican interactions, and I. One of the things is that community is so central to Anglicans. But I wonder whether, and different dioceses might be different, but I do feel that in a lot of ways, in the Diocese of Montreal especially, we've passed the tipping point. And to ask the small group of people who are worshiping, to take care of buildings, to take care, the people who are volunteering are the younger people in my parish, and they may want to look into more spirituality, but they can't because they have to be the treasurer and they have to be the groundsperson and they have to be this and they have to be that. And so we are we've continued to have this sort of structure that requires a much larger congregation base, and we have to sort of be really direct in understanding that if we want to have paid clergy, and I don't know how maybe I could do a Sunday service and have absolutely no relationship with a community apart from social relationships if I wasn't paid, because I just don't have that much energy to be able to have to work a full-time job and then volunteer a huge amount at a church. So to have paid ministry, to have these beautiful church buildings, to have all these things, we really have to be creative and to sort of separate what we're doing for service to the community from what we have to do in order to maintain our buildings. For example, I think that we've done a number of things where we gave away things for free because we thought that was ministry. But a lot of the things that we gave away for free were things that we had to pay for, and people actually didn't value them because they were for free. And so they figured that since they didn't pay for it, it wasn't of value. And I do think that we have to be really clear about what's sort of an event ministry that is meant to make money, what's an event ministry that's supposed to build community, what's an event ministry that's supposed to develop discipleship, what's the use of our buildings so that we can have as much of our buildings pay for themselves through rentals and through usage in different ways. But I really think we have to be realistic about how we do ministry, but also how we maintain ourselves financially and not tire everyone who decides to come and become and get asked to do the you're here for 2 weeks. Could you be our treasurer? We're looking for a treasurer. Anyway, so I just think that there's a lot of things that we need to think about. And if we become more central in our communities, we may be doing our Christian work, but by doing our Christian work, we may have to eventually sell our churches, have, working priests and all of this stuff to be able to have communities that are completely different, because we can't pay professional priests. So we can't pay professional priests with a 19th century church with 30 people on Sunday who are over 75. That's just not fair to the people who go, and it's not reasonable. So we should have been doing this 30 years ago, but we weren't ready to do this 30 years ago. So a lot of things are going to have to be sacrificed if we want to continue to be Christians and offer what I would say is the most life-giving experience that I've ever had. I don't know if I would have even survived if I wasn't Christian. And so it's very life-giving for me. But we can't afford what we have now.
Thanks, Sophie. I'm going to pass it to Jose, and then we're going to need to move on to the next presenter. So Jose, if you could go ahead.
Yes, what Sophie just mentioned speaks to me. I just took the leadership in a church that is extremely small. We've gone way over the tip. We're on the slide down, if I may say. If we're a dozen on Sunday, that's about it. And yes, I have 2 or 3. I have 3 people who are a bit younger than me, and the others are way over 75. So how do we even start anything? We don't have the people power to start anything. And I know from past experience that ministry that is led and only by clergy doesn't give much of anything. That's my experience anyway in the Laurentians. So I'm wondering how we do that. And forget surviving monetarily. We're not even talking of that, you know. I have a full-time job outside and I'm very part-time in the church. So how do we do that? I just don't know. I don't know anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, I really appreciate these reflections and these questions, and I think that we will continue along, and we'll go into the workshop portion after the break, and maybe we'll be able to address some of this a little bit more deeply. But thank you for sharing, and thank you, Neil, again for your presentation. We are going to move on to our next presenter. I would like to introduce you to the Reverend Canon Martha Tatarnic. This is her book. And I think, actually, well, we were supposed to talk with Steve next, but is it okay, Martha, if we shift to you next? Is that okay? Yep. Yeah, I think that, pardon? Yeah, we changed it. I think now would be a great time for Martha, because I feel like the moment is right for you, Martha, given everything that's just happened. So if that's okay, you're next. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leanne. So as you might imagine from the title of my book, I am going to take you into that fundamental why question, which Leanne identified as being pretty central to everything that we're talking about today. And I'm going to take us into that why question by way of naming some of those pressures that I think we've been identifying that we feel as leaders in the church today. So earlier this week, I got an email from a place where I was supposed to do a book signing and a little wine and cheese event for my new book. And I think that this story is going to sound familiar to people in some of its elements. So the message that I got about this book event was, we're really sorry, but we have to cancel. We don't have the people. We don't have the staff. We don't have the resources to make this happen. I find this pretty telling in 2022. I published a book in 2019. And in 2019, it was really easy to line up events, in-person events, and to have people come out to them. And now, just 3 years later, it feels like the world is a really different place. And getting people together is not in any way a slam dunk. It's not just that we feel this kind of trajectory in the church. Places everywhere are feeling like getting people together is a really different ballgame than it used to be. So in our worship services, in our fundraisers, in our social gatherings, in our book launches, attendance is an issue. But it's also an issue in workplaces. I keep hearing reports about how people want to continue to work from home. They don't want to come back to the in-person workplace. I have kids in school, and getting kids off of online learning, as much as they complained about online learning at the time, is also becoming a challenge. Getting people back to the classroom and getting people to want to come out and do things together. Even for teenagers who supposedly crave social gatherings more than anything. There's a lot of anxiety around gathering. We grieved all that was taken away from us in that ability to gather. But I think that we've also gotten used to our cocoons, to the convenience of online living, working from home, and the ability to live our lives without the inconvenience of having to deal with one another. We wouldn't be able to have this particular gathering this morning with me in Southern Ontario and people in Quebec and on the East Coast and everything if it wasn't for the convenience of online gathering. Obviously, as church leaders, we are responsible for gathering people together. And so we want people to come out. We want them to leave their cocoons and to be together. We want that because that's what we do. But when we are clear that we want people to get together and to come to our events, as Leanne noted, that begs a pretty fundamental question. And that fundamental question is why. Now, I'm gonna clarify that why question even a little further, and I'm gonna share another quick story. So, when the proofs came back for my book, Why Gather, I was charged by my editor to go through the proofs and to just make sure that everything was a-okay before it went to print. And I opened up the proofs and realized that there was a typo on every single page of the proofs, because at the top of every single page, instead of saying why gather, it said why bother. So my book was almost retitled Why Bother. And actually, I think that it could have been called that as well. Or that could have been like the hashtag to go along with the book. Because as soon as we ask the question, why gather, we also have to ask the question, why bother? Like, why does any of this matter? It is safer and more convenient to stay at home. We can avoid a lot of hassle and expense and annoyance by staying at home. We've really had our habits reshaped by COVID. And so what? You know, like if we can conveniently gather online, if we can conveniently just live our lives without having to deal with one another, why should we bother with getting together at all, whether it's online or whether it's in person? You know, the answer has to be something more than just a numbers game, right? Like, as leaders, we do play the numbers game. It has been ingrained in us that our success as church leaders has to do with how many people show up for what we're doing. But, you know, we live in a world that has some pretty serious problems on our hands. And I think that we need a more compelling answer to the question of why bother than just it makes us feel good as leaders. We have all across our world, we have health challenges, pandemic challenges, mental health challenges, climate change, the threat of nuclear meltdown, economic collapse. Need I go on? I mean, we know the serious state of our world. And I think that we have to seriously ask ourselves, does the gathered community of faith, whatever that looks like, does it have anything meaningful to contribute toward those really serious problems? That question of why bother kind of seemed like a fortuitous typo, because it's a question that has haunted me for the past few years. I've been in church leadership now for over 2 decades. And in all of that time pre-pandemic, that message of success by numbers has weighed heavily on me. By March of 2020, when the world started to go into shutdown, I have to say that question was weighing so heavily on me that I wasn't sure that I wanted to continue in church leadership. I was exhausted, and I was very definitely flirting with burnout. With COVID and the closing of our churches to public gatherings of any kind, I think that we all stepped off the hamster wheel for a minute and asked ourselves why we're doing what we're doing. And as I considered these questions, there was a concept that became really important to me and that felt like a compelling place to talk about the life of the gathered community and why it matters. That concept is ultra realism. And it is a mental fitness technique that is actually used in endurance sports. Now, I'm a runner. I am not a fast runner. I'm not a sprinter, but I've become pretty good at running for a long time. However, no matter how good I get at running for a long time, when I'm first starting out on a long run, it's very easy to undermine myself before I even get started. I feel like I have a stitch in my side. I've only gone 1 kilometer and I have 29 to go and I can't possibly do this. And what if I run out of energy? And it's that a raindrop that I just felt like. I wish it weren't so windy. I feel like I have to pee. You can be done before you even start. Ultra realism recognizes how much futile energy we pour into worrying about what might be coming or wishing that things were different right now. Ultra realism shifts our perspective and our energy to really being clear about seeing, accepting, and embracing what is actually happening. What is actually happening right now, and what am I going to do about it? So I might have a stitch in my side, but my breathing is good and my legs feel strong. I can work with the wind, and although I might have 29 kilometers to go right now, I'm running. And it feels good. There's obviously a metaphor here for life, not just for endurance sports. And there's certainly a metaphor here for the church. We can put so much energy into wishing that things were different or worrying about what's coming next in the life of the church. And it's not that change isn't good and necessary, and it's not that long-term planning isn't important, but change and planning are futile unless we start with what's really happening. And when we can see what's really happening, we can also see why it matters. And I think that knowing why it matters is a pretty empowering and liberating place to put our energy and to build our plans. So what is the ultra real church? What's the ultra real of the body of Christ? Why are we together? And whatever our gathering looks like, what is it about? Well, I think that the ultra real of the church can be boiled down to some pretty basic concepts. Number one, like it or not, we're stuck with each other. And number two, God is at work in us. These are not realities that we have to make happen. They are already happening. What we can do is we can get better at seeing what is real and putting our energy there. The body of Christ isn't a designer community. We're not brought together because we all believe the right or same things, or because we agree on everything, or because we like and understand one another. We're brought together by virtue of God's love for us and our desire to respond to that, our ability to respond to that. And somehow or other, God has been at work in us. God has been at work in me, as unworthy as I sometimes feel that could be the case. And God is also at work in all of the people who are different from me and who I don't necessarily understand. Why does that matter? If that's the ultra real of the church, why does that matter? Well, that's not a religious reality. That is a human reality. The whole reality of the body of Christ is based on just this basic human reality. And I think that ironically, we came face to face with that reality most clearly during COVID, the reality that we're connected to one another. Somehow, in having to physically distance from one another, it was clear that that we're actually completely, inextricably, physically infected with one another. We couldn't even talk about ending COVID. We could only talk about flattening the curve, because there is no way of living on this planet apart from recycling oxygen and water and bacteria and COVID germs from one living body to the next. There's no override button on the bonds of relationship between us here on this planet as human beings. And on this planet, we're set up on a microscopic level to be inextricably connected to one another. The brokenness of our world is actually in trying to live apart from this truth. So, if we look at the flourishing of addiction, depression, anxiety, mental illness, suicide in our communities, if we look at how senior homes, especially at the start of the pandemic, were so tragically under-resourced, and how many of our elderly people died at the beginning of our pandemic. If we look at the call to truth and reconciliation, and the recognition that poverty and lack of access to even the most basic human rights like clean drinking water, that is stridently racialized in our country and is connected to long unaddressed injustices. If we look at the melting glaciers and rising global temperatures, setting up a colony on Mars rather than fixing up what we have here on planet Earth, all of those pieces are connected to trying to live apart from that reality of how absolutely fundamentally, inextricably connected we are to one another. So I think at the heart of that ultra real of number one, we're stuck with each other, and number two, God is at work in us. We have an answer to that question, not just why we gather, but why we bother. Going back to what Neil said about loving my neighbor, we know that church isn't a place, but it does help to be in a specific place repeatedly in order to be the church, because it's in being in one specific place that we become really clear about who our neighbor is. And we're able to open our doors to the stranger who might need to know where to look for food or sanctuary or welcome or prayer. I think that these events that we can plan and these gatherings that we can plan in all of the different creative manifestations of what they can look like are an answer to that spiritual disconnection that is wreaking havoc on our planet, a witness to how our lives are actually bound to one another and bound to God. And, in the telling of our stories, in the relationship building that we do, we get to see how God has been at work in the lives of others. And that helps me to open my eyes to how God has been at work in my life as well. I think in that offering of language and eyesight and permission, we give something to a world which has also experienced God at work in their lives as well, and permission to speak of holy things, to wonder about where God is at work in all of our lives. I can't wave a wand as much as I might like to and make it 2019 again, or make it the 1950s again when decline in the church didn't seem like a thing. I can't win the numbers game on the gatherings that I lead in 2022. I can drive myself crazy trying. What I can do is I can be clear about why we do this at all and why it matters.
That's amazing. Thank you, Martha. Now you know why I was glowing about her book, and I'm glad to see that so we already ordered it, so you can do that.
Yay.
Yeah, it's really, really worth our time. So I now open the floor because I'm sure there's a lot of response questions, in particular to Martha's talk. So I will mute myself and watch for hands coming up. I trust the silence is not because we're not inspired by everything Martha just said. Maybe we're just needing to process. But it was, yeah, still no one. Okay, was there?
I do see some.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
BMP admin has their hand up.
Go ahead, Chris. You're muted.
The most famous words of COVID. You're muted. So I would change my name up there, except the three little dots aren't showing the change your name thing. So my name is Chris Berger. I'm here in the Diocese of Montreal. Martha, while you were speaking, I confess I went on your parish website, and I see you have, I noticed your summer cafe. So I'm a particular church I lead is, you might call it a turnaround kind of church, but I don't think that's a model that is possible for a lot of churches. I think a lot of the future of the church looks more like what Leanne has done with Supper Club here in Montreal and with the cafe kind of thing I see on your website. Now, I saw there's only once a month, but can you speak just to more of that style of gathering? Do you yeah, can you speak to that?
So the summer Advent Cafe was only once a month. Allison, who spoke earlier of Infinitely More, is part of that community. But the rest of the year, we gather indoors for Advent Cafe, and it is weekly. So yeah, we started it 6 years ago. I guess almost 7 years ago now. And it was in response to a lot of prayer and conversations with people across the community who were imagining sort of a different form of church. We really love the outdoor summer cafe, a summer Advent Cafe, because we're just always surprised by who wanders by and how we're able to kind of offer something that meets a need that maybe people didn't know they had. Unexpected things always happen when you worship outdoors. And yeah, our community is kind of based in the basics of what it is to be a Christian community. There's the resources of prayer and the liturgy of the church. There's a lot of music. There's the breaking open of the word. And there's fellowship, but we just kind of have mixed it up in terms of where we hold the service. It's in a different part of the church. It's cafe style. The formality is quite different because it's not a Sunday morning. It allows access to people for whom Sunday mornings don't work. And it's become really important in that community for preaching to be shared across a wide swath of people, so that really becomes a witness in a different sort of way every time that people are invited to preach. It ends up being part testimony about how they have seen and do see God at work in their lives. So there's a really interesting community of faith sharing that has evolved in the community.
I had not put together that Allison as part of your community. And so now that I put those two sets of words, what you've said and what Allison said together, the picture's making a lot of sense. So yeah, thank you for that. I just see, what you talked about there in terms of sharing the preaching. I think our models of not only gathering, but of leadership need to go through some changes. And that's just very encouraging. I'll just say, in terms of some of the previous conversation, I've been involved in a church merger lately, one younger congregation coming together with one older congregation. The older congregation is just so exhausted. They just like handed everything over to the younger congregation in the merger, said, "We're just so glad you're here to rescue us, because we're exhausted. We've got no more energy left." And so I do think there needs to be a renewal of generations in the church for all kinds of reasons, but often it won't come through Sunday mornings. It'll come through alternative forms of gatherings, such as you just described, and supper club, Leanne does, and so forth. So thank you for those comments. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. I'll invite Simon.
I'm unmuted.
This is a question to Martha. Thank you, Leanne. You used the word, people discovered they were inextricably involved with each other. And I wondered, from a planning point of view, how often people need to get together when they find themselves inextricably involved with one another. Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it 3 times a year, like families to get together for Thanksgiving and Christmas? What does it take for a community to have that sense of, yes, we are a community because we get together, whether that get together is via Zoom or face-to-face in person or some other way? Because that leads, I think, Sophie asked the question, I got a very similar question. We can organize these one-off events, but does that actually build community? Around here, we have churches that perhaps meet 4 times a year, once a month in summer. Is that going to build a community in the area, or is it just a time when people are on holiday and get together on a Sunday morning because it's a nice thing to do? And is it worth keeping open an ongoing church ministry in that place for that kind of group? Those are the kind of big questions. So yeah, what kind of frequency? Any insights?
Yeah, so I definitely don't have the magic formula to answer that question. I think that one-off gatherings and specific time of the year gatherings can certainly meet a lot of different functions. But my observation about building community is that it is a lot like diet and exercise. So, you know, if you say, I'm going to go to spinning class, for example, Neil, you know, I'm going to try for once a month, and I'm going to eat my greens like every other week. That's probably not going to have a big impact on your life. And B, you're probably not going to get in the habit of either spinning or eating your greens. So I think that building community is a lot about habit. And, you know, I think that that's part of what we're struggling with right now post-COVID, is that people's habits have changed. That's not to say that we weren't struggling pre-COVID, but you know, it's a different ballgame again because people's habits have changed. So I do think that there is something about the regular gathering of community that builds community in a way that can't be built like just on occasion.
I'll invite Allison. It'll be the final question for Martha.
Hello, Yin. I just wanted to add to something Martha said about our Advent Cafe community. And again, we meet on a Wednesday at 7 p.m., not in the church, and our liturgy is a bit different, and we end it with fellowship and food, really good food, and which I think always makes a difference. But I think what's really neat is that we've developed a really unique gathering of people because we're sort of at a different time in a different space. So we have young people who come and be part of our community who want a different kind of worship. we have this really great group of like the Sunday morning ladies who come on Sunday and also come on Wednesday because they want a different kind of enrichment for their faith. The service happens at the same time when Out of the Cold would happen. So we had people from that community come in and join us. And then what's really neat is that those groups aren't separate within our community. Like there's sort of this great, all are welcome and all are accepted and all are loved. And so those groups aren't separate within our little community. They're very integrated. And I think that's a kind of thing that can happen when you meet outside of Sunday morning. Some of those traditional barriers aren't there that people can sometimes feel in a Sunday morning service. And so you can attract a different kind of group and create a unique community. So I just want to add that from our experience.
Thanks, Allison.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you again, Martha, and thanks for the comments and questions from Martha. That was a really rich discussion. I'm going to now invite our third speaker, Steve Green, to take over.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Leanne. A couple of things I want to say. So I want to say there's a lot of people here online that I haven't seen in a long time. So I know it's the Diocese of Brandon, there's London, there's NDG, Notre Dame de Grâce. I was born and raised, and God bless that community. Colleagues from here. I saw Janet from East Coast, and friends and colleagues at the Deanery of Waterloo. So thank you for being here. From the last conversation with Martha and the lady from, I'm going to check this out infinitely more. I remember I was in Cambridge, 2 communities, 2 churches. And because of COVID, there were certain people who were unable to come. They didn't feel comfortable going to the Sunday service. So I'd say, Steve, can we do midweek service? And I can honestly say our Thursday morning service fed me more than the Sunday morning service. The reason is this: A, it was very intimate. We got together. And also for that homily time or that sermon time, it at least went an hour. The reason why I went for that, and the service was like 2 hours long. Like legit, you can ask the ladies. It was 2 hours long. So then by 3 o'clock, we're like, okay, we got to get to like legit to the Eucharist now. Can we just stop and pause? Because that hour was, let's break down the gospel here. On Sundays, I'll blab on for 10 to 15 minutes, whatever it is, on my thinking, my interpretation. But I said, okay, ladies, you've had a week to read the gospel reading. What's your thoughts on this? And legit, for at least an hour, robust discussion. And they're like, okay, I don't get this. I'm like, historically, it's this. So now, Mrs. So-and-so, give me your thinking. Is Jesus the right here? Is this the Pharisees' fault? Is it like all that critical thing? So why I presented that is for my presentations on theology of community. I played sports for many, many years. And I always say, you can ask my counsel, and they're getting fed up with it. Teamwork makes the dream work. And it's not always a Steve shtick thing. Comes to Sunday, they say, okay, it's Steve's show. And I'm like, no. You may see my face, but there's people behind the scenes who did some fantastic work to prepare the altar, the readers, the intercessor, the music, all that stuff. It's teamwork makes the dream work. So community to me is tremendously important, especially for my background, being raised by a single mom. I know that other people have put me in this position to do a faithful job for Jesus. So everyone has a specific job, a role and responsibility, and everyone is valued in regards to it. Hence the richness, the importance of community or the body of Christ. The eye can't say to the foot, you're useless, or whatever it may be, different parts. It's like, no, I need you, Leanne. I need you, Martha. I need you, Neil. I need you, Cheryl. I need you, Diane. Whoever it is, I need you, Lisa. And you need me. It's a partnership. It's a dialogue in regards to that. So with the theology of community, with the church I'm serving, it's in Lucan, 20 minutes north, Highway 4 of London. And so with that, the year, and I told them at the beginning, okay, we'll do a theology of community. And they're like, what? Yeah, the whole year, it's a theology of community. And are we actually in communion with Lucan? So before coming here, Matt Martin, who's a phenomenal man, a great priest, did some phenomenal work, like outreach ministry and all that stuff. And the church on Main Street, 189 Main Street, the Red Brick, is known for outreach, known for its great work. known for the backpacks and things of that nature, and working with the local food bank. And so, okay, do they know us now as Christ followers? Yeah, we're the Anglican Church. Okay, yeah, it's great. Do they know us by our love, by our faithfulness? Do they know that we're in communion with Lucan community? So with me, my why is always Jesus. I'm never, ever going to back down from that. And I'm an Anglican priest in regards to that. So John 15 is one of my favorite scripture passages. Abide in me and I will abide in you. You can do nothing. You can do nothing without me. You can't even breathe without me. And so to me, those two tenets for me in the theology of community is believing and belonging. I know some people who have been Christians since they were 5 years old, and they thrive, and they're great followers and disciples of Jesus, and that believing goes into space of belonging. This is my church. This is my community. There's some people come to the church like, yeah, I don't know about this guy you guys can't see, but you believe this dude rose from the dead. Like, think about this for a second. Logically, you believe a dude 2,000 years ago rose from the dead. Y'all are crazy. But they love the belonging. They're accepted of who they are, their gifts, their talents, their strengths, their weaknesses as well. And over time, by being in communion with them, in deep relationship, and I love that word, you can say, you know what? I want to learn more about this guy. This guy that you read in your scriptures, and he's the resurrection and the life. I want to know more why these guys like Peter, James, and John would actually say, you're the Messiah. Like, he actually came from a virgin. Like, I want to learn more about this. So hence coming in communion, in deep and abiding relationship with each other. A critical part also about community, which I can't remember who's, I think Leanne said, is having the grace, in your opening prayer, having the grace to make mistakes. Having the grace to make mistakes. And how often in community we're going to screw up. We're human beings, and how we don't have the grace, or we limit the grace on saying, you know what? You're going to fall on your face. We're all going to fall on our faces. But in community, deep relationship, we pick each other up. We dust each other off and say, you know, it's all good. You fell forward. That's awesome. And we fall forward together. And sometimes you'll fall back. You backslide. Okay. Why? What happened? Once again, a deep and abiding relationship. Once again, going back to John 15 in that. In regards to theology of community in our year theme, I presented to them, especially in my selection committee. I said, each month we're going to have a different theme. And they're like, okay, why? It says, because I want you guys to focus on a different goal. So in August, I started August the 1st, it was new beginnings. And not just talk about, hey, I'm the new pastor. Da, 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 da. All that stuff is like, okay, a new beginning now in your relationship with Jesus. I'm going to poke the bear at your faith, at our liturgy. I don't know anything about Lucan, so I'm going to start poking the bear historically and culturally and liturgy-wise and all that stuff, because I want to have this new beginning on being part of your community. And also we have a pushback in regards to that. Also new beginnings to having partnerships, relationships with different spaces and places in our community that they don't know about us, like intentionally have a deep relationship with us. So one of them is the Lucan Library. Down the street, yeah, we know them, they know us, and so forth. But have you ever partnered with them to do a ministry? So one of them is basically art night. We're having to do with 8-year-olds to 12-year-olds 4 times this year. So October is Halloween, December is Christmas, March is St. Patrick's Day, which is a huge event, obviously in Lucan, but it's an Irish community, but also Wilberforce, Black settlement for those who the underground slaves came from Ohio, and also April for Easter. So let's connect with the library, have a deep relationship with them, and invite kids to go to the library, because they don't know about me, they don't know about the church. Like, I don't know you, and I don't know the church, but I'll go to the library. It's a safe space. I do know the supervisor there. Okay. And let's collaborate with them. Have an art night with these kids and say, hey, the theme is Halloween. We have a professional artist coming in and we'll teach you a different theme, a different medium of art. And let's have a partnership. And over time, it develops, it grows. And then in June, speaking with Lee, who's supervisor there, great woman, say, okay, in June, let's have an art gala. Let's get the kids all spiffed up, dresses and suits and so forth. And if they can't pay for it, I'll pay for it. So the kids can go and say, hey, mom and dad, these are my art pieces. And there's a pride there. There's an honesty. And we're building not only their self-esteem, but a relationship with them, saying, okay, why you guys do this? Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love your enemy. Love your enemy too. which is crazy. Deep and abiding relationship in that. So it was new beginnings in August. September, it's keys. So this month is literally Keys, keys. So Jesus says, you have the keys to the kingdom. And I heard people say, Peter has the keys to the kingdom. I'm like, no, yes, but he also says, we also have the keys to the kingdom. And so are we actually using our keys to the kingdom to invite people into deep relationship, not only with Jesus, but also with us, that we're also authentic and transparent in our faith and openness to say, yeah, I got weaknesses. I got pains. I got hurts. I got sorrows. Yesterday, I was blessed to go to a community of people of different abilities. It was a meet and greet. And it was legit. I spoke with the event coordinator there. So like, Steve, take 10 minutes. You come in, you introduce yourself, you say the location, shake hands, kiss babies, all that good stuff, and we'll let you go. We know you're a busy person. I'm like, hey, if it takes 10 minutes, cool. It takes 15, I'm good. I was there for an hour and 15 minutes. One gentleman says to me, do you do confession? I'm like, yeah, I do. Why? I got to talk. I got some things I need to present to you, Father. I'm like, don't call me Father. Just call me Steve. That's number one. Number two, you got things to talk about. Let's go. Legit. After, and we had a conversation about a good 30, 40 minutes. Didn't know the brother, but says, I trust you. I want to be in relationship with you. And here's some things that are on my heart and my mind in regards to theology of community. So keys to the kingdom of God. Are we actually opening the door to say God's grace, God's mercy, God's love, God's faithfulness, God's forgiveness? If we go to tomorrow, Luke 15, 1 through 10, talks about what? Lost and found. Repentance and rejoicing. Are we actually opening the doors to those people to say, God loves you? Yeah, you screwed up. Yes, there's a consequence for that, but he still loves you. Also, the flip side, I've been speaking with the people for this month is, are you withholding those keys now? Are you saying to people, yeah, you don't deserve God's love. Yeah, I don't like you, so therefore I don't think God should actually forgive you. You deserve bitterness and resentment and pain and sorrow and so forth. So once again, keys. God says you literally are able to open things and close things. Are you actually opening them for my glory? Are you actually closing them because you're just bitter and you're resentful and you just don't want to be deep relationship with me? You don't want community. It's about you. You're conceited. You're selfish. Next month, obviously, Harvest and Thanksgiving. And then obviously in November, coming to those big words, anamnesis and kenosis, a letting go, but also a remembrance. Those are critical things. Once again, it all connects with community. Are we actually living a faithful life, not only within our four walls, but also most importantly with our community for Jesus in that? I mean, blessed because I'm so excited. Not only for the theme, but my wardens and the council. Like, okay, Steve, try it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's great. And I'm a person. Leanne knows this. Tracy for sure knows this. I will do whatever it takes. I will do whatever it takes, and I'll throw spaghetti against the wall, use that analogy, to make sure people know of Jesus' love. So, for example, try to do what. So Trinity, my daughter, our daughter who's 14 years old, is an average teenager, and we have some great discussions at the supper table. And one of the conversations during the summertime was like, "Hey, Mom and Dad, do I have to go to church like now? Like we were moving, because we went from moving from Cambridge to London, serving in Lucan. Do I have to go to church? Because like I know you have to go, Mom, because you got the kiddies, and Dad has to go. He has to preach, and I get it. Do I literally have to go? I'm 14 now. I can stay at home, right?" And we're like, no. You don't pay rent. Since when do you think you're going to stay home and do what? Play games all day? He's like, well, yeah. No. So I was like, we'll make it your while. What sucks about the church? And she's like, legit, she's like this. You really want to go there? I'm like, yeah, you're 14. Let's have a real conversation about community, about the church. She goes, what would edify you, empower you to say, I want to go to church? She goes, nothing about your church makes me want to go to your church. The only reason I have to go to your church is because you're my dad. And you're forcing me to go to church. There's nothing of the liturgy, the music, nothing, no part A to Z says, I want to come back next Sunday. I'm like, okay. So we're in community, right? You're my daughter, I'm your dad. Help me to reach now those teenagers. You're going to high school in a few weeks. So if you're the average teenager, that means there's other kids who are like, I want nothing to do with your Anglican tradition. You don't connect with me. I'm like, you're right. Because if I was 15 years old, a black kid, I'd be like, I'm not going to Anglican church. You got nothing for me. You don't speak to me. So what would hook you in then, Trinity, to say, yeah, that's good. She goes, you can't do Sunday morning. I know people said this before, but it's true. We're always trying to, and Neil said it very, very well. We're trying to morph the service to always say, you have to go to Sunday. You got to go to Sunday. You got to go to Sunday. You got to go to Sunday. And she's like, I can't go to Sunday because our kids, as Neil said, and many people said, she's a ringette girl. So Sundays, you're on the ice. And before it was like, okay, we can, massage the schedule. And now it's like she's on provincial teams. Like, nope, Sunday, you better be at practice. You made a commitment. You better be there. It's okay. Help me now to create a community by which high school kids, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, actually like, yeah, I actually want to learn about this Jesus. I can't come or don't even want to go to your Sunday service, but I want to learn more about this. How do we create a community? So one of the things we talked about is a podcast, which will have this conversation, dad, daughter, priest, interested person to learn about not only the Anglican traditions, but about God, about Jesus, about the 3 in 1, the 1 in 3, and having those robust conversations. Then she said, let's go to my school then, if it's okay. It's a Roman Catholic school. I mean, they may say, no, screw you, you're Anglican priest, you're a heathen. I don't know, we'll find out. But they'll have those rich, robust conversations in that. So that's one of the things. Another one down the line, hopefully, is faith in film. So many kids are not coming to our church right now, but they'll watch a movie. They'll watch shows like The Boys. They'll watch Love, Thor, Love and Thunder. They'll watch soon to come out, I hope it's awesome, Wakanda 2. Thank you, Leanne. In regards to that, they'll watch different films and so forth. And I don't care if it's Hulu, Crave, Netflix. They'll watch them, but they won't come to church. So it's okay. You're not coming to me? I'll go to you. Let's have a discussion then. Let's get together with your friends and let's break down Thor, Love and Thunder, whatever it is. Let's have a robust conversation and talk about God's in this. And so I remember one time talking to her, like, what movie was it? I think it was Black Panther. It's like, there's so much God in this. It's like, where? I'm like, come on now. And we broke it down like a fraction on saying, it's right here. It's right here. It's right here. It's like, oh, wow. I'm like, it's everywhere. Every single show I can bring you redemption. Every single show I can bring you betrayal. Every single show I can bring you love. Every single show I bring you sacrifice and selflessness and so forth. Let's go back to the gospel. Let's go back to Nahum. Let's go back to whatever it may be. Matthew Anderson. Thank you, Gail. So in regards to that, critical parts, though, they can't come to us. We must go to the, hence really creating an intentional community in that. One thing that Neil says is true is giving, not demanding. I had to flip that. And I remember in seminary, it was demanding academically, and we were always taught, they'll come to you, they'll come to you, they'll come to you. You gotta be a great preacher. You gotta have immaculate liturgy, blah, 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 blah. And I remember one day in chapel, Martin Levesque, great priest, great man. My first year, I'm like, hey, I'm Steve. He goes, yeah, I'm Martin Levesque. Nice to meet you. He goes, hey, Steve, I'll give you a heads up. Your 3 years, it's only for one day, buddy. Congratulations. I'm like, what did you say? He goes, your 3 years of studying. This is my first year. It's like 2 years ago. He goes, it's only for one day. The real work is from Monday to Saturday. I'm like, what kind of priest are you to tell me this? Like, dude, I'm in my first year. Should you give like a pep talk of like much more uplifting? He goes, just get ready. And he was bang on. No one's going to care about your hermeneutics. No one's going to care about the history of Nahum or Malachi. They're going to care. 2 o'clock in the morning, are you there? Are you there with that person who has just died and they're grieving the loss of a matriarch? Are you there at noon by which you're able to stand with them and give pastoral care? Are you there? Hence being that deep and abiding community. And so I'm much more intentional. Okay, what do I have to do to serve you, Holy Trinity? What do I have to do to serve you, Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so? That you know that A, God loves you, bar none. And B, as your pastor, I am with you. Doesn't matter at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. I promise you, if you need me, I'm there because we're in a deep relationship. We're in communion. So why does it matter? That's one question that Martha presented, which is phenomenal. I'm going to get the book tremendously. Why does it matter? Because we're called to it. There you go. We're called to it. God calls us into it. God commands us. If you're a disciple, you're commanded to show this love, to live in his love, to show his grace, to have that deep abiding relationship, to be in community. And yes, we will have those fights, rubbing each other like, you smell. I don't like you. You're ugly. Whatever it is. We don't like everyone. That's true. But God says you still have to love each other and bear that fruit because you love me and you love your brothers and sisters, your siblings in faith. So I hope this has been helpful. Once again, thank you tremendously, Leanne and Neil and Martha and all of you for this. And if there's any questions or concerns, I've been more than happy to do my best. But I'm huge in not only community, but also hospitality in that. Without hospitality, we're screwed. And not just hospitality, come to me, but hospitality, I want to serve you where you are, whatever state you may be in, because I love you. Christ love, not just an emotional Hallmark crappy love thing. So, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. I will now open the floor for any response, questions, comments to engage with Steve Green. Okay, you've left everyone speechless. I think I see a hand. Who is that? Oh, go ahead. Sophie, yes, go ahead.
All I wanted to say is just to highlight what he said about it's not Sunday. You know, I think that that's definitely the thing that I've heard all over the place too. It's not a renewal of Sunday. It's something different.
Eleanor.
Steve, as always, thank you for your energy. Thank you for your passion. It's inspirational. I think what I want to really thank you for is the conversation that you shared with your daughter Trinity, that you have shared with us. These are sacred conversations we need to have with our teenagers, but with all as we are building relationship, is to deepen our why. Why for the sake of Jesus? Why for the sake of the gospel? That's why we do what we do. But we also need to be, as you are, I think, encouraging us to remain open to hear the criticism, remain open to hear what we are doing that's missing the mark, that feels exclusionary, that feels in a way that I don't want to be part of that. I don't feel like I belong. And I think that's a really important message that you brought to us as well, is one of the, I think, basic tenets of our belief is that we belong. But are our communities that we actually do feel like we belong? And that includes the clergy. I think as clergy, do we feel like we belong where we are doing our ministries? And that makes a difference on our ability to go back to something you said, Neil, about taking risk. If we don't feel like we belong, it's hard to take risks. If you feel like you belong, you feel that when you take that risk and step out in faith, others will follow you. But again, if you haven't done the relationship work, it's going to be really hard to do that. So again, Steve, thank you for your passion. Thank you for encouraging us. Have those conversations and stay open to them and don't take them personally. I think that's one of the most important things, is to learn how, and it's something over my 20 plus years of ministry, I still work on that. When someone trusts us enough to tell the truth of what they're really feeling and experiencing, then we need to trust ourselves enough to hear it and not take it personally, but hear what they are saying, and then by God's grace, respond.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor, for your kind words. And yeah, you're bang on, and thank you for it. If I could add one thing, Leanne, I do apologize, is that it took me a long time to swallow that pill from Trinity's like honesty, and we still have conversations now at the dinner table, but it was hard. It was like, your church sucks. The whole service is atrocious. Like, and I'm like, sweet Lord, girl, what? How dare you? But she was right. She was right. So thank you, Eleanor, for your kind words. Thank you.
I'll invite Janet.
There. Hi, Steve. It's great to see you. And as always, you deliver. I put that in the chat comments. Great comments and all kinds of quotes I wrote down. I love the idea of the podcast. I love it. That's, if you go ahead and do that, YouTube it for sure and communicate.
I will. She's much more tech savvy than me. I'm a pencil and pen person, but yeah, she'll be the leader in that one. I'll just sit down and say, okay, go. And but yes, I'll make sure everyone is informed in that. So thank you, Jack. Good to see you as well. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know how to lower that hand.
Okay, that feels like really good. I really, really appreciate the comments and, of course, to you, the presentation. For those who have to run, no worries. We are continuing to record. I'm going to grant us now a much needed 10 minutes, just a quick 10 minute break. Let's just grab a quick drink or do you need to do. And we'll be back here just before 10 after 11 for the workshop part. So you don't want to miss part 2 of the session. So take your break. See you in 10. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So you know how much kind of behind the scenes administrative stuff always goes on with these types of webinars and stuff, inviting people and being very meticulous about making sure everyone gets the link and avoiding Zoom bombers. And this is a kind of very all-encompassing time. Well, I managed to forget to give a few people the link. So I just was during the break, just bringing people on. So they might just pop on late. So I apologize if I missed anybody. There's been a lot of people, which is really amazing. Good problem to have. I think Penny, welcome. You're here. Welcome for the workshop. We're heading into the workshop sesh.
She has to go, but
okay. So yeah, of course, people pop in and out as they can, but
she'll be listening but can't participate.
Okay. Thank you. Cookie's here as well. She's been here behind the scenes helping out with the admin stuff and with the tech stuff. So thank you to Cookie for being a part of the support team this morning. All right, it's 11:11. Let's get back to it. So you're welcome to the session 2 of our webinar on hosting inspiring events for ministry, webinar/workshop. This is the workshop component. So I will invite the Reverend Ken and Doctor, all the things, pug lover, spinner, friend, Neil Mancor.
Basco's sitting here snoring away. So if you feel a sort of zen, that's because Basco is next to me. I'm going to share some maps with you very briefly today. We in the light of COVID, thought we needed to find out, what was going on around all our various churches. And kind of inspired by the Diocese of Toronto and their congregational development team, we commissioned a series of maps from Environics plotted against all of our churches in the diocese to see who lived around there. And I'm not going to share these in much detail with a view to going through them in detail, because there are maps, for one thing, and maps can be very flat, boring statistics things. This is not a statistics talk, but what I have found really helpful is it has been a way of finding out who actually lives around our churches and who is our neighbor, who are our neighbors. And that is a very powerful thing to find out. They also have kind of shown us that, as we've been talking about this Sunday morning thing, this attracting thing, that will attract people. I think that we have grown our churches in the past under the assumption that there are enough people around that we can all share and that they'll make it to our churches. And when you begin to look at them, certainly in the Montreal context, that's not the case any longer. And those patterns of immigration and migration have changed. And on the other hand, they do show us many opportunities to serve, many opportunities to make common cause. And there's a lot that we actually know. So think about, again, the assumptions you make, especially around mission and attraction. If we do this, they're going to come. Are there enough people? What do they do? What are the people like who live around your church? What are their lifestyles? How can you connect with them in ways that are meaningful to them and life-giving for you? What are the questions that you can ask? And I have found this very surprising and interesting. Now, you don't necessarily do commission a bunch of maps. You can go for a walk around your neighborhood. You can go for a prayer walk and just ask God to show you who your neighbor is and how God wants you to serve them. Or you can commission a map that'll look a bit like this. Ta-da! Isn't that exciting? And so you might want to ask yourself some questions. As I said, I'm not going to take us through this in some way, but this is the island of Montreal. It's not our whole diocese. But who are the people who live here? What do we know about them? And, should you be doing Sunday school or children's ministry? Well, it depends. And if you have families with children at home. And so in this map, the deeper purple places are where there are more families with children at home. And I think that's really a good question to ask. Like, what is the structure of the people who live right around your churches? Because if you look at this place here in the east, where it's kind of very light colored, there aren't a lot of children living there. Now, just because there are children doesn't mean we're going to attract these people, but where there is deeper purple, there are families. So who are these families? What are their lives like? How can we serve? So you see, some places have more potential than others for that ministry. And it made me realize that in some places we shouldn't beat ourselves up. If Sunday school isn't what it used to be, then maybe we can serve in other ways. Or what are the what are the lives of the people who live around us like? Is this a place of poverty or a place of wealth or somewhere in between? Are people struggling to make ends meet? And if this is a map of incomes for people, and again, the deeper purple is places of greater wealth. And you can see this church down here, it's got very deep purple. But just because there are wealthy people around you doesn't mean, again, you will attract them into church. But again, it can be a question of what are the lives like and how can we connect with people? And you can see in some areas where it's very light, there can be quite a lot of poverty. Or in these places of lighter blue, well, actually, that could be places where people are struggling. So they maybe have a home and maybe they have a car and they're living their lives, but they're struggling. They might have high levels of families, but they're struggling income-wise. So how can we help people who maybe have families and might be struggling with mid-level incomes, or who have families, have low incomes? What are the needs of people? Or if people are wealthy, that people still have needs, how can we connect with them? What are their lives like? So you see, there's just a lot of rounding, a lot of assumptions that I might have made about the people who live around my church, that things like this help me look at them in a different way. Or what is this is visible minority penetration. What is the ethnicity like of the area in which you live? And if so, are these people who've immigrated recently, or are they more established? Are they people who are settling into life in your community, or who have been more established there? Well, those are really good questions to ask. And so this place where it's light means there's very little visible minority. Up here, where there is darker color, means it is more ethnically diverse. And then again, that's a different kind of ministry that you want to have. It provides opportunities. How can you help people who are settling into life in Quebec or Ontario or Prince Edward Island or wherever it is? What are their values? What do their lives look like? You can find out. So this shows opportunity to reach out to people in ways that are energizing for us. On the other hand, again, this attraction question, but are there going to be enough people all around who we can attract to our churches? And the answer is probably not. And I think that's kind of liberating. So this is the picture of Anglicans. The people who said on their census they're Anglican. And if you say that on your census, doesn't mean you're going to go to church, right? But the people who actually ticked Anglican on the census. And as you can see, the places where there's purple, this is where I live. I live right here. Can you see that? Just under where it says Point Claire. So there's my house. I ticked Anglican. And so someone can come and evangelize me if you want. You're welcome. But there isn't a whole lot of that. And I think that this is actually very liberating, that we need to realize, okay, we're not going to be able to share out the Anglicans amongst ourselves. That's not the model in which we can continue to have vital congregations. This is the people who say they have no religious affiliation. And you look over here in this very dark purple area, those people are toast, right? So, because they're all non-religious. Does that mean that there's no opportunity there? Absolutely not. There's huge opportunity there. But if the people who are around you are saying they have no religious affiliation, the starting point for connection is going to be very different. So you've got to think about, where are you starting the conversation? Just putting up a sign that says Anglican, BAS service, 10 o'clock Eucharist, is probably not going to get very far over here. These places where it's lighter, people are reporting that they're religious. So how do you define the nature of your community, your church? What are you doing? So again, lots of possibility, but it calls us out of our assumptions about how people will come to church and encourages us to think about how we reach out to people as individuals. And lastly, I think this is important. What is the context in which you live? We often talk about the Quebec context, but these are called prism segments. And I just want to show you all these colors because they are different lifestyles. And it turns out there isn't one Quebec lifestyle or one Quebec context, but many. And here on the island of Montreal, it's about 18 of them. And you can find out a lot about people. And you can see where the colors are very densely packed. These are places of very densely packed population. And so there are very many different lifestyles. So you can find out a lot about the people who live around you. What are their values? What do they care about? What do they spend their money on? What are they thinking? What are their shopping habits? There's a lot that we know. And I think that a lot of opportunity for us to make common cause with them and to make connections with people, but it's going to be different in different places. So you can see this area here where it's kind of mustard colored by St. Hilda's. That's a place where there are a lot of young adults starting out, living in low-rise apartments. They're very open-minded. They're often vegan. They are sexually very permissive and embracing. Over here, where this large red is what we call diversity nouvelle. So it's people who are established, who've come from other countries and are more established in Montreal. So very different lifestyles. And so huge opportunities for us to find out who these people are. And then the purpose of this isn't maps are the secret to our future. But I think what we need to do is ground ourselves in the people who actually do live around us, who actually are there, and not what we think are there. And so maybe you don't have to go around commissioning a bunch of maps, but you could go for a prayer walk and ask God to show you who your neighbor is. You could just decide that your commitment is going to be to a radius of about 1 kilometer around your church. And you're going to find out who those people are, what they care about, where they shop, what their needs are, their attitudes, and think about how that might feed into the ministry that you want to develop in your church. I think that's much more life-giving. And Canada Helps. It uses the same information as they put together their Canada Helps Giving Guide every year. If you don't read the Canada Helps Giving Guide, you must. It should be your essential reading. Because we can find out what Canadians are agitating about, what they're giving their money and their time to, And they use the same segment, so we can actually know that what people in the different communities we live in are supporting. And that's one of the ways the church can make itself relevant, because we actually share a lot of common values with the people who live around us. Things we care about, they care about. And so we can make friends and we can work together. So the opportunities are there. Find out who actually is living around your church and what their lives are like. And then allow that to shape your thinking and your planning and your dreaming. Boom.
Yeah. I will now invite, unless Neil, do you have a specific question you'd like to ask the group, or should we just see where the Spirit calls us to respond?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot there again, but I invite you to reflect on Neil's presentation and to share or ask questions.
Neil, thank you for that. I love I didn't know about the Canada Helps document. That's phenomenal.
That's great.
I've gone to the census 2021 to get the landscape of the Lucan area, its income and all that stuff. But financial documents are holy ground for us to not be separated and be divided, but more so know the commonalities of each other and how to help each other. And you're right, how we have to work together. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So in your work as a congregational coach at Diocese of Montreal, do you always go to your church and say, hey, here are certain documents you guys need to start off with? Like it's A, B, C. What is your process? If a church says, hey, Neil, could you please come and help us?
Yeah, we've been looking at these maps and trying to understand who are the people who live around you. And a lot of the times we just don't know. Like, this is why I'm saying we make these assumptions and we don't realize, there is a lot of opportunity for you to do things that are life-giving for you right around your church. And sometimes the surprises, there are just amazing surprises in this. Like, as I said, I showed you that church out of the East, St. Hilda's. They have a very interesting opportunity out there. It's opportunity rather than lack, but it's a very different opportunity than, somewhere else. And I think as well for us as Anglicans, as mainline Christians, I think I would say is that we actually have more in common with Canadians than we realize in our values. And this is a major opportunity for us. But the things we care about are many of the things Canadians care about. But you need to, it is sort of a segment. It's the older Canadians care a lot about, guess what? Elder care and mental health. That's actually but a lot of people care about racism. That's huge. I think that people have been giving a lot of money this year to the Indigenous cause, environment. So, things that we care about, they care about, and we can work together. And in doing that, we're showing why we're relevant. Before we can sort of ask them to spend money on keeping our lights on, we need to show people why and why we're making a difference. And local.
Well said. Thank you, Neil. This is good. Thank you.
Go ahead, Simon.
I want to pass on a little bit of good news, but I will say this wasn't done directly in a church context. It was me in my neighborhood, but it's along the line of Neil said, find out who is my neighbor. I discovered that in my locale, I'll call it, of 20 houses, thereabouts, a third of them had changed occupancy in the time of COVID. So a lot of people didn't actually know who their neighbors were to each other anymore. I also discovered when we had a week-long power cut and I was down at the community center charging batteries, but my city encourages neighborhood or block parties, fête de quartier en français, and had all sorts of resources and materials. So on July the 1st, we had a street party on the street outside our house, as it turned out. And the thing is, in Sunnydale, you have to sign up. You have to get people to agree to this party. So I had the absolute perfect opportunity to go door to door over 3 or 4 nights, getting people simply, please sign here and say you're okay with the concept of a street party. It wasn't a commitment to come. It was just, that. But it's amazing, just that first round of visits, what opened up as people talking and just glad to see somebody. And on the day itself, I'd scheduled it formally from 10 till 12, but set up from 9 o'clock onwards. We actually started at 8. People hung around till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I say hung around, didn't just sort of stand with their hands in their pockets, but actually talking, engaging, conversing. And the things that came out of that, besides everyone say, this was such a good thing, we should do it again, was, for instance, well, who could look after my house or will look over it while I go on holiday? Because the insurance company says somebody needs to go and look. Who could take my dog for a walk if I'm sick? Things like that. Suddenly people felt who is my neighbor was something that they could connect with because, oh, well, I met you at the party. Now, I say it wasn't done from a church, come to church on Sunday point of view. It was purely, let's see if we can build our neighborhood. But, and this is the third piece, was out of that, then I found people would start stopping and someone said, can I ask you a question? And someone said, can I talk to you about something? So it developed into a kind of ministry thing with a capital T, nothing more than that. And it didn't take a lot. And I think especially for us where our congregations occasionally get into double figures, if I exclude the organist and worship leader, of what kind of very small group, this is something I'm going to pass on and say, maybe we can get a little outside help, but simply organize a block party, a neighborhood party where you live and see who's there and put a little bit, taking the point that Neil said with the maps, just adding a little flesh to that bone and skeleton. But I say the two things that absolutely struck me, everyone agreed to the concept of the party and 90% showed up. The only ones who didn't were those who were working. And it went on for 3 times as long as we expected because people so liked the occasion. That's it.
Thanks, Simon. Go ahead, Jillian. Unless you want to respond to Simon? Are you okay?
No, I'm good, but thank you.
Go ahead, Jillian. You're still muted, Jillian.
Again, the most common phrase. I'm in Ottawa, in the east end of Ottawa. In the Ottawa Diocese, in the last 2 years, there's been an extensive program going on called the Shape of Parish Ministry. It is related, this may relate to some of the people that we're talking about not being able to care for their churches because of numbers. It has been related to looking where Christians' needs are not being met. And I guess it's being focused on Anglicans, but I think it's kind of a general situation. Also, which churches are really struggling. The decisions have been made. It's been so far a 2-year process. So every church in the diocese was asked to send in a profile, and then we had in-person meetings. There were question and answers and things about what our needs are in the churches, what the financial situation is of the people in your congregation, sort of like the maps were showing. I am in Gloucester, in the east end of Ottawa. Somebody just put that in the chat. At Epiphany Anglican Church, but that's just the church I go to. This is a diocesan thing. Every church, it was started by the bishop, Shane Parker, and it has been, we are due to vote on some changes at Synod in the fall. So it's going to be an interesting thing that develops. And what I'm getting from information from this group is ideas. There's going to be churches that are closed. There's going to close. There's no question. You have to bite the bullet. Epiphany is actually a church that came into being after amalgamating 2 churches just over 20 years ago. And then we built a whole new building, which has been quite successful. But it will be interesting. The information I'm hearing about small groups and meeting outside of Sundays and things, I think is going to be so important when the results, I don't know what they're going to be, of this study happen and people become aware of them, that we really are going to have to look at non-Sunday worship, out of building worship, out of church building worship. So that part has been really interesting for me to hear. And anyways, it might be interesting for people. You would be able to find more detailed information about this study, The Shape of Parish Ministry, on the Ottawa Diocese website.
Thanks for sharing that, Jillian. Neil, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that's great. Thank you. Great stuff.
Oh, Allison.
Hello, me again. So I just wanted to respond to one of my favorite things that you've all spoken about is finding partnerships outside the church, which I think is just so powerful. And I also wanted to speak to partnerships with other churches. So like part of our ministry mandate is to cross denominational lines and encourage others to do the same. And I think event-based ministry is a great place to do that. So some of our most successful concerts, for example, have been ones where we go into the Anglican church, but they find ways to partner with all the other churches in their communities. And admittedly, this happens probably more often in smaller communities, but it's not just, send your poster out to the other churches, but we've done concerts, for example, where it's in the Anglican church, but the Baptist youth group hosts the reception at intermission, and the Pentecostal pastor will give the opening prayer, and the United pastor will give the closing prayer. And suddenly you have all the churches invested in the event in a really practical way. It means that everyone's sharing resources. No one church is bearing the burden of putting on a whole event. And then there's this really great witness to the community, because so often churches are seen as arguing and divisive and disagreeing. And suddenly you're saying, we can all have differences and we can all come together to love our community and care for them. And I think events are a really great way that we can do that, because it shares resources, creates a larger event than we can do on our own, and really reaches out in the community. And we find that the response to those, in terms of people, not just numbers of people coming, but the people who come. Oftentimes we've kind of stood at the back of the church, the priest has gone, that person doesn't go to our church, and that person left church 3 years ago, but they've come for tonight. So I think events can be a really powerful way to do that for our community.
Yeah, and it floats all our boats, right? Because for all of us, this is all energy.
Thanks, Allison. I love that as well. And I really hope that, again, one of the key takeaways around this conversation is that collaboration is essential for this type of ministry in particular. With your consent, Neil, do we feel satisfied talking about the who? I think the who is a very essential piece of the puzzle. We're going to shift for the last portion of the workshop to a video on the why. I think let me just do a little screen sharing and we will watch that. Escape. Sorry. I did click it, no? It's fine.
The why was born out of pain. It was never an academic or commercial exercise. It was born out of a time in my life, many years ago, 10 years ago, where I had lost my passion for what I was doing. I owned my own small business. I was living the American dream. Superficially, my life was fantastic. And yet, I didn't want to wake up and do it again. And I was embarrassed by that. Who am I to complain about my life? My life seemed perfect, and yet I hated it. And so I kept it to myself. Every ounce of my being, all the energy that I had was invested in pretending that I was happier, more successful, and more in control than I felt. And it was debilitating, quite frankly. strange things start to happen when you put yourself in that cycle and the stress starts to build. You start to become paranoid. So, for example, I was convinced that my employees hated me. I didn't go out much, and it was really a bad time. And it wasn't until a friend of mine came to me concerned that I wasn't acting myself and basically offered me nothing more than moral support. Whatever you need, I got your back, I'm worried about you. And it was that simple act that gave me the courage to face my own problem. And it was that simple act that gave me the courage to seek out a solution, to go back to the way I used to feel, to be passionate about something again. There was a confluence of events, and I made this discovery that every single organization on the planet, even our own careers, always function on the same three levels: what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And it was based on the biology of human decision making. It wasn't some highfalutin management theory. It was based on brain stuff. And I realized I knew what I did. I was good at it. And I knew how I did it. I could tell you what was different or special about the way I did things, but I couldn't tell you why I was doing it. That was the missing piece. You have to have all three. I became obsessed with this thing called the why. I figured out how to find my why, and it restored my passion to levels I had never experienced before. And more importantly, I figured out how to help others find theirs. And I did what anyone would do. When you discover something beautiful, you share it with your friends. And my friends started making crazy life changes themselves. And they started finding happiness and passion that they'd never experienced before. It was me solving my own problem that happened to help others solve it for them too. And people just kept inviting me, and I just kept saying yes. I was making huge decisions that were really easy to make. Like, I shut down my office and started over again because I realized the business I had built was so inconsistent with my why. All my friends thought I went out of business and they were worried about me. It was the easiest decision I ever made. In other words, when you know your why, the filter is clear. It's not like there are options. The option is obvious. There's only one option: share, give, inspire. And everything that I've achieved, any success that I've enjoyed, has all been 100% because of the gracious, just amazing generosity of people around me. My friends, my colleagues, people who just believe what I believe. They're the ones who either introduced me to others, or took a risk, or said, let me try that, or bought a book, or watched a TED Talk, or more importantly, sent it to somebody else because they thought they would be inspired by it. For all of the things that I've done over the past decade, I still feel like I'm at the beginning. I've been saying it for 10 years. When everybody says to me, congratulations on X, Y, or Z, my answer is always the same: tip of the iceberg. And I think that's what keeps me inspired, which is, for me, it's a journey. I'm on the right path. I'm walking past the right mile markers. In other words, I know I'm making progress to the vision that I have to build this world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired to go to work, feel safe when they're there, returning home at the end of the day fulfilled by the work that they do. When I started the race, I ran by myself, and it's lonely, lonely, lonely. And now I got like 1,000 people to the left and 1,000 people to the right, and 1,000 people behind me. And I look around, I'm like, yep, we're going to change the world. We're going to change the world. There you go.
I love you. Next. Sorry, I have to turn that off. Hold on. Okay. So that's Simon Sinek, and I quoted him in the ebook, and he wrote a book called Find Your Why. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, good. Yeah, Find Your Why. So somebody's unmuted.
Well, we haven't had a chance to even have a bite or anything. Could you make it?
Okay, so I invite your response around why. I think, Neil certainly covered the who, and today we've been talking about the what, because there are so many whats in hosting inspiring events for ministry. But it's really the why that is the thing that's going to distinguish this conversation. So I'm not sure if is that your hand up, Allison, or is that just, no, it's just from before. If anybody would like to reflect on that, go ahead, Martha.
I'm just really struck by, the common threads through all of our conversation this morning. And, as we consider our neighbor is, and the relationship building, and that invitation to have conversations and to really listen, like not just to have conversations so that we can put something out there, but so that we can pay attention to what people are saying to us. I think that across all of that networking and relationship building, what we keep, I think, discovering is just like the wonder of how God is everywhere, and like God is at work in all kinds of different and surprising places. And again, like I think that is energizing because it allows us to see again how God is at work in us. And I think it's empowering because we don't have to make that happen. Like it's happening. Like God is good and faithful, and doesn't need isn't contained in our church walls or our church communities in any way, but our church walls and our church communities can sure be blessed by becoming really attentive to seeing what God's doing.
Thanks, Martha. Appreciate it. Any other thoughts, closing thoughts or thoughts on the why? Or Simon Sinek's quote? No? Oh, yes, I see Eleanor. Go ahead.
Leanne, I want to thank you and all of the presenters today for doing this with us and for us. And I think you really have brought, and Simon's video really has brought the importance of the why. I think we do know how to do liturgy. We even know how to change it up if we need to change it up. We know what we're doing. We've been coached. We've been prepared through seminaries, through workshops, through conferences, through all of that. But I think Simon really, that video, so thank you so much for that video, is for us to really examine as leaders in the church the why, to reintroduce ourselves to the why, that yes, God is working in and through us, and that's why we are doing what we are doing. It's not, for me, it really has been brought home again. It's not about keeping the lights on in the building. It's not even about maintaining our century-old buildings. It is about God moving and working in and through us to bring the news of love, of peace, of comfort, of healing, of redemption. And that's why we are doing. And I don't know about you, but I certainly have found over the years, when we stay focused in the why, and the why is God, it sounds trite, but it's also been true in my experience. God provides. And we spend too much time, I think, our why being meet the budget. But we have in scripture, we can't serve two gods. We can't serve our budget. We can't serve our building and serve God at the same time. So thank you again for the video that reminds us of the why. This is about God, for God, and maybe that's for us a renewal in the church, is for us to have a renewal of that why. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Eleanor. And certainly a budget is not a why at all. A budget's never a why. Yeah, in the book, when you do eventually take up a project in particular, when you think of your why, you can really find yourself digging quite deep into what that why might be. And the more clear you get on your why, and the more concise you are on your why, the more easily the project will unpack and roll through, because your why will be your director. So many comments. I really appreciate your participation and contribution. I want to thank you for spending your Saturday morning here. I don't know if it's as beautiful weather-wise where you are, but it's a beautiful, perfect Saturday. So I hope we have time to enjoy the rest of our day. We need to be blessed as we go out. We're all charged right now. We need to be blessed as we go out. So I'm hoping that Steve would be willing to just give us a blessing as we leave this space today.
Sure, let's do this. Almighty God, thank you for today, and bless us, Lord, to continue in your why, professing and living a life of faithfulness, of grace and mercy. Bless us to continue to bear your light in the world, to show your love, to show your forgiveness, to show you in our neighborhood. So bless us and guide us. We humbly ask this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and our Savior. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you so much, Martha. When you do get Martha's book, what you're going to do is you're going to not only buy the book, you're going to go and write a Google review. Martha, tell us what we need to do.
Yeah, actually an Amazon review would be great. It really, really helps small publishers and starting out authors like me. If you can just post even a brief Amazon review, it doesn't have to be a novel in and of itself. It just needs to say something about why other people should read the book. And I would be really grateful, and so would my publisher.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I wish you a beautiful rest of your day. I'll send you the recording. If you don't have the ebook, you can get it. You can do what you want with it, share it. It's yours. And I just wish you many, many fruitful, spirit-filled events that build communities and reveal the love of God to the people around you in your neighborhoods. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Leanne.
À la prochaine.
Thank you.